Have any of you ever learned how to settle your minds? Yeah? Why would you suppose we always start there, with settling the mind? Why would we begin with settling the mind?
Something can arise from underneath.
Sorry?
Until it's settled, nothing can come up from underneath.
Nothing can come up from underneath, or at least what comes up might not be seen. Yeah.
The surface was right.
Okay. I think, as usual, we start by addressing the issue of what is the unsettled mind. And I think most of you have been through that exercise, haven't you? Where you sit and you see how the mind moves around. And over and over again, this is the point we start with. Recognition of how the mind normally wants to be. So, the way your mind normally wants to be is experiencing. It wants to experience movement. It wants to experience thought. It wants to experience emotion. It wants to experience stimulus and reactivity. And so it goes on and on. It's always wanting to experience something. So we're always moving through the world with this driven sense of what can I reach out and take hold of? How can I get some experience out of this? And this is the basis of the mind always being slightly disturbed. It doesn't mean we're in an emotional upheaval or anything like that. It's just that the mind is always moving around from one thing to another. So when we do the settling the mind exercise, what we're doing is once again familiarizing ourselves, reminding ourselves that it is in the nature of the mind to move. And that movement produces distraction, produces movement away from the moment. Therefore, our first training is to settle the unsettled mind. Now, as soon as we start talking in this area, terminology fails us. Because I've said settling the unsettled mind as though we do something to the mind. But hopefully by now, most of you have learnt that is not the route we follow. We do not address the activity of the mind directly. And this is something we learnt in our mindfulness training, and it's something that becomes increasingly important in our insight training. That the mind, or the activity of the mind, is not the direction we're going to face. We don't directly address any of the issues that are happening. So terms like mind control, changing the mind, improving the mind. What other terms have cropped up in your experience?
Stilling the mind.
Huh?
Stilling the mind.
Stilling the mind, that's the most terrifying of all, yes. Stilling the mind. Emptying the mind.
Blanking.
Huh?
Blanking.
Blanking the mind. Do those terms make your hair stand on end? Yeah? You haven't got too much, have you? Yeah. So, we don't do any of those things. We learn to change the conditions. That is what we're looking at. Changing the conditions. And as soon as we did our mindfulness training, we started that process. When you're doing your mindfulness training, it's very simple. You keep bringing your attention back to the support. It drifts away into distraction. What is distraction? It's basically engaging some form of activity, thinking or emotion or whatever. So our mindfulness training is just to do that. It's recognizing the mind goes away into distraction. It is seeking experience. We recognize that. We bring it back. probably stays on the support. How long? 1 second? Who can manage more than 1 second at this stage in your training? 2? Yeah? Perhaps we should have an auction here. Anybody improve on a 2? Anyway, we know what it's like. We know that within moments, the mind is going to move away from the support. Yes? We're all familiar with that. Therefore, our mindfulness training is very interesting. We look at our definition of mindfulness, which is knowing what's happening while it's happening. So the essential ingredient of our mindfulness training is that development of that quality of knowing. And then it's knowing what is happening while it's happening. So if the mind does not stay on the support, that's actually not a problem. So we're not subjecting ourselves to some kind of marathon where we're trying to see how long can I stay on the support. We simply bring the mind back to the support, knowing very well that even as we're bringing it back to the support, it's preparing for its next excursion into distraction. We know that. And that's totally all right. Nothing wrong. So we bring the mind back to support, and the support is always boring. So there's nothing more boring than a long period of mindfulness training. So we're on the support, and then the mind starts to move away. If we are still present with its movement away, knowing it's moving away, there is still an element of mindfulness there. So if you thoroughly understand this, it's not a problem, because there are then 2 clear dimensions. There is witnessing the resting mind that is resting on the support, and then there is witnessing the moving mind that moves away from the support. So you can then sit there and you say, yes, mind is on the support. How boring. And then the mind is thinking, yes, it's boring, I'm going to think about something. So it starts moving towards thinking, and you can see it's beginning to move into thinking. So we now know from our mindfulness training that becoming aware of distraction in itself is a part of our mindfulness training. Knowing we're on the support, knowing we're becoming distracted. If that is the case, what is complete distraction? Not knowing what?
Where they are.
Yeah, it's not knowing what's happening while it's happening. So I only become fully distracted when I'm no longer aware that I'm thinking. So I've drifted completely into thinking, and I'm now lost in thought. Our English language has most of the phrases we need. I'm lost in thought. That means any element of mindfulness has been lost. Now there's nothing wrong with that. That is where a lot of human beings spend most of their time. And a lot of people want to be lost in thought. Very often people are experiencing painful or disturbing mind states, and they don't want to be there to experience them. Therefore they move away into some form of fantasy or other activity to get out of touch with what's going on. And there may have been times when you did that yourselves. Nothing wrong with that. So we humans are very versatile. We have ways of avoiding experiencing what we're experiencing when we don't want to, when it's too painful. So we go into denial. So our mindfulness training has a fundamental simplicity about it. It is bringing ourselves into the moment, into focus, knowing it. There's no contest. How many of you have experienced a sense of contest with your mindfulness training? Where you feel you are striving towards a goal, where you had to achieve something, where you had to get it right. Have you ever had any of those? Where there was some sense of difficulty having to arrive somewhere. If you understand it in this way, it becomes much more relaxed. There is no final destination or point of arrival. It is just an ongoing journey. It's just a continuing work in process. So this is the mindfulness we've been trying to focus on, this very relaxed, very easy, flowing knowing. Not, of course, becoming lazy and just sitting there daydreaming. That would then be a waste of time, although if you want to do that, that's okay. Every now and again you can do that, but then you'll become bored with it. You know, even daydreaming gets boring after a while, especially if we're doing a long retreat. So then finally you get bored with daydreaming and you think, well, now I might as well start trying to be mindful. So you daydream mindfully for a little while. And that's wonderfully boring. There is nothing better than to daydream mindfully. You know, it's like going to the neighbor, sneaking into the neighbor's property to steal their fruit. And the neighbor is sitting there and says, help yourself to as much as you like. There's no more fun. So you can do that with your activity and your mindfulness training. Go into your daydream, but you do it mindfully. Until eventually mindfulness starts to creep in wherever you are.